Hello, and thank you for joining us at today's FIT Authors Talks. FIT Authors Talks is part of the Love Your Library event series and is an initiative of the FIT Library that brings authors from our community to speak about their work. From photography to fashion illustration, fiction writing to art, these talks encompass a multitude of projects and themes and celebrate creativity. Today, our FIT author is Yevgenia Nayberg, who's been teaching illustration at FIT since 2022. Yevgenia is an award-winning author, illustrator, painter, and stage designer. Her illustrations have appeared in magazines and picture books and on theater posters, music albums, and book covers. Her paintings, drawings, and illustrations are held in private collections worldwide. She has received multiple awards for her picture book illustrations, including 3 Sidney Taylor medals. Her most recent book, A Party for Florine, Florine Stettheimer and Me, explores the relationship between a little girl and the artist Florine Stettheimer. Thank you, Yevgenia, for being with us today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show some gorgeous illustrations from the book. And then we'll have a discussion. Let's see. Present. Okay, can you see?
I can see.
Okay. Okay, so here's the cover for your book, A Party for Florine, Florine Stettheimer and Me. Your book explores how you learned about Stettheimer, but for those who haven't read it, could you elaborate a little on your discovery of her and her art?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know her art until the Jewish Museum had a show of her work in 2017. And a friend of mine went to see that show and sent me a self-portrait by Florine over a text message. And I couldn't believe the likeness. She looked so much like me, or rather, I looked so much like her that I had to go to the museum to see for myself. And that's kind of how I discovered her and discovered her work. I didn't really know what to do with this. It was sort of more of a party trick conversation because I wasn't really thinking about writing a book. I just thought, what an interesting coincidence. And she was also an artist, also of Jewish descent, 100 years older than me. So all of that seemed strange and mysterious, but I didn't plan on writing a book until much later, a few years later, when a publisher asked me if I have any female biography that I would like to publish. And then I thought, okay, maybe I should really go ahead and explore Florine a little more.
Okay, that's amazing. You do look very similar, the
Yeah.
two of you. I bet it was kind of strange to see someone who was also an artist kind of look, you know.
It was really strange. And I remember posting her self-portrait to my social media and people commenting and saying, oh, this is such a beautiful self-portrait of yours. I didn't say it was her. And someone said, oh, I wish you still painted in this style. So people really thought it was an older self-portrait.
Oh, wow, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about Stettheimer? These are her works right here.
So Florine was born in 1871 and to a very wealthy family. And she got to travel very early to Europe to study art. She traveled with her mother and her sisters. And so she learned to paint and draw in Stuttgart mostly, but also they traveled all over Europe. And after World War One began, they came back to New York, and they lived in Elvin Court, which is this beautiful building near Central Park. And she and her sisters and her mother, they held this artistic salons where all kinds of eccentric artists and writers and photographers and theater critics came to visit them. So she was this really flamboyant, larger than life, witty, artistic human being. She never really exhibited very successfully. She only exhibited a few times, but she left quite a body of work, and most of her work was donated after her death to various museums. Columbia has the biggest collection of her work. And these are the paintings. This is two from the four pieces that are at the Met Museum.
Oh, wow. Okay,
And
so
they
they're at
hold
the
the
Met.
cathedrals of New York. Mhm.
Nice, nice. So, is the way you illustrated the book in your usual style, or do you find that you and Stettheimer have similar motifs? This is your illustration
Yeah.
here.
Well, it's very difficult to do anything about other artists because you definitely don't want to copy their style, but also I didn't want to just work in a realistic style because it's not my style. So kind of
Mhm.
like a cool challenge for me was to combine both, to combine my own style, but also create some sort of a symbiotic look that would reflect Florine's style as well. I don't think my work looks a lot like hers, but I had to stretch myself and sort of fuse those two styles together. So it seemed like there was a lot of influence.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed like the color palettes are sometimes a little similar. The colors she uses and the colors you use in the book are just so vibrant and lovely.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
easiest thing to connect, to make
yeah.
connection with the palette. Yeah, that's the easiest thing to do.
Well, did you write the story first or illustrate the book?
Well, I did write the story first. I usually write my books before I illustrate them, but because it's a story of an artist, everything came from a visual place, so to speak. So even the story was kind of based on her art and description of her art. But again, this is not a traditional biography. I have illustrated traditional biographies. They're kind of difficult
Mhm.
to work on and to make them interesting and different. So this is not really biography. This is more of a fan letter from a child to an artist.
So is that how it makes the book different from other biographical books? She's a character, but she's a real person who influences the story. How do you make those connections?
Yes. So when the publisher approached me and I thought, how do I write this? I really didn't want to just write a straight biography because I'm not a biographer,
Mm,
and I thought, what would be a good way to do it? And I wanted to create that connection about myself looking like Florine, although my character is not necessarily me. I thought the book has to be about that, about this little girl looking at Florine's life and realizing that the only likeness that they have is really on the outside. I mean, the little girl is also thinks of herself as an artist, but otherwise, she compares herself rather negatively with Florine,
mm.
and she just imagines what kind of life she could have had if she was like Florine. So once that convention was created, it was rather easy to do because a child can imagine anything. A child can compare her life to the life of this amazing artist in many different imaginative ways. So that really worked really well for the story.
That's nice, nice. What are the white silk pants a real detail of Stettheimer, or is that something that the little girl attributed her imagination to?
It is actually a real detail. If you look through her paintings, you would see that a lot. And again, for the times,
Mhm.
Florine was very avant-garde and very brave because she did wear pants, and that was not very common at the time. But once I read about it, I read about the white silk pants. I thought, oh, this is so wonderful. It's such a good idea. I can really add that because it just makes this character so special. And also, it's a funny line if you think about it, about a modern child imagining lounging around in white silk pants. Yes.
Yeah, that's really sweet. That's really sweet. So here's another illustration that's from the book. What medium did you use to create the pages and or what materials did you use to illustrate?
Well, I usually use mixed media. This is acrylic with
Mhm.
some digital collage. I usually start with acrylic and sometimes color pencils and then finish digitally. So
Um,
this particular page is a little more geometric and a little more digital because it's the modern world of the little girl. It's not the world of Florine. So for
mhm,
Florine pages, everything is a little more painterly, a little more vintage looking.
mhm.
But this very rectangular kind of geometric world is the modern world and, the world of New York City.
That's great. So do you have like storyboards, digital and um, traditional storyboards for the book that you go from that you use your acrylic on and then transfer digitally, or how do you mix all those mediums together?
Well, I do make a storyboard, but I just sketch it out on little pieces of paper, whatever little garbage pieces of papers I have around me. But I just know my process at this point. This is not my first book, so
Yeah.
I know how things will look eventually. So as I work traditionally, I know what else will happen in the next steps and how I'm going to finish it and how I'm going to enhance it digitally. So, it just takes a little planning, but usually I know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you've said these are some of your books. You've said, don't worry about pleasing an unknown child with your story. Write for the child that you once were, or better yet, the child that you are. When did you decide to be a children's book author and illustrator?
Well, I illustrated my first book when I was 4 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was a wordless book because I couldn't really write at that point. And I always liked that my mother is an illustrator, and I could see her work, and that inspired me to work. And I'm sure copy her style
Mhm.
for a while when I was little. So I always liked that. And then I illustrated my first book professional, I think, in high school.
Oh,
But I
wow.
wasn't really considering writing at all for many years. And I would write little short stories, but never seriously, never professional. And especially writing in a foreign language just seemed really daunting to me. So I was sort of waiting for the right story. I was illustrating other people's work,
Mhm.
kind of hoping that I would find something that would really resonate with me. And eventually, my agent at the time suggested that I should write something myself. So I wrote my first book, which you can see on the screen, Anya's Secret Society. That was my first book as an
Mm.
author. It came out probably about 8 years ago at this point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yeah, and ever since I've been writing my own books and also illustrating other people's work, but
Right.
focusing on my own as much as I can.
Do you find that the ones that you do that are your own, the ones that you're writing, they they have, not similar themes, but are for a certain little boy or girl or tell a certain perspective?
Well, like you said, there for the girl that I once wore. So
Yeah.
I, I don't try to imagine some long distance child. I just write
Mhm,
what I would like, w- either as a child or right now. So, of course, there are some themes. I love New York and I romanticize New York, and I sort of made this conscious decision to have this romantic notion of New York City, which
mhm,
sometimes it's hard for me to maintain, but I still work really hard at that. I
mhm,
like to think of New York City sort of this beautiful postcard that is very romantic. So a lot of my books either feature New York or are about New York. And I do like to write about arts, but some of my books have some immigration um,
mhm.
content, you can say, some immigration themes, like typewriter is about that, about a typewriter that immigrates to America. So it's written from the point of view of a typewriter. And Anya's Secret Society is also a book like that. And I hate borscht to some degree as well. So
Mm.
yeah, I just relate to what I know and I try to describe what I know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what are you working on some things right now? Do you have any other books coming out?
Yes, I have three more books that I'm
Mhm,
working on right now. One is a graphic novel that will come out next April, and
mhm.
it is called Past Perfect Radioactive, and it's a graphic memoir about, actually, that's a real memoir about my childhood growing up during the Chernobyl nuclear explosion.
Oh, wow.
So that's one. And I have another picture book that's coming out in the summer, next summer, called Another Tongue. And that's actually a book about languages and how you learn a new language and what it feels like to encounter a new language for the first time, and
Mhm.
whether it's difficult and traumatic or fun. So it's a book like that. And then I have another book called Not So Superhero, which also a children's book, a picture book that will come out even later.
Nice, nice. So you've worked with, here are books you've illustrated for other authors. You've worked with many of them. How do you decide which books to illustrate that are from other authors?
Well, you look for the story that resonates with you in a certain way, and some stories are wonderful, but you don't necessarily relate to them, or you just don't click with the material, or the angle of the book may not be right for you. And some books really work. Some of this, three of these are biographies, more traditional picture
Mhm.
book biographies, and the stories were really interesting. Some biographies were more interesting than the stories, but I was really excited to read and to know more about these people beyond what was in a picture book. So I like that part of research, sort of the kind of research that doesn't require a lot of commitment from me, which is pretty difficult when you illustrate your own biography, or you
Mhm.
write your own not your own, but the biography that you write. It's a little more complicated, but this way you just get to know the character, the real person, and
Mm.
interpret it in a certain way. So yeah, that was really interesting.
Do you have any particular collaborators that you work with more than once, either artistically or authors or um, with different ideas that you have?
Sure. Two of these books, A Queen to the Rescue and Martin and Anne, were written by Nancy Chernin. So I worked twice with her. She's a wonderful, very prolific, very passionate children's author.
Mhm.
And I've been incredibly lucky to work with my current editor, Taylor Norman. We're working on our second book together, and of course Neil Porter, who is an iconic, legendary editor, and we worked on two books together. So I've really lucked out with
Mhm.
fantastic editors, and I'm happy that I got to work with them more than once.
So here's another illustration from the book, A Party for Florine. What was the process? You've gotten to work with all these wonderful people. What's the process of getting your own book published that you illustrate and you author, as opposed to the process of one that you're just illustrating for?
Yes, it's much more complicated because
Mm.
you have to have a project, you have to have a dummy of a book, sort of a rough maquette of a book ready before you or your agent can submit it to a publisher. Usually, when a publisher has a text they know they want to publish, they reach out to an illustrator. So I guess it sounds funny, but I'm going to say it. All you have to do is illustrate. But when you write
Mm.
your own book, it's different because you need to write it and you need to illustrate it, and everything has to be ready. So a prospective editor sees the whole thing and can understand your vision. So a lot more work goes into it, especially for me because first of all, I'm an illustrator, and it's a little more difficult for me to write than to illustrate. I feel that I
Mhm.
don't need inspiration to illustrate. I can just get up in the morning and I can draw no matter how I feel, and no matter if I'm stressed or my head is full with different thoughts. But with writing, it's a little more difficult for me. I really need to organize myself and be in the right mood. So it's more of a process. It's more challenging for sure.
Now, how I've read the book, I've gone through it multiple times, and I love the poetry of your writing. It is for children, but it's also very fun and whimsical for adults as well. Um, the way you write is colorful. Purple socks, yellow books, kitty cats, things like that. How did you go from uh just illustrating to finding that style of writing?
Well, for this book, it was easy because you just
Uh-huh.
look at pages and it just sort of it's right there in front of you. It's just sort of translating almost whatever's there visually
Mhm.
into written word. It's not that difficult. I think it's much more difficult to come up with something completely new that's not based on anything that you're looking at. I
Uh,
think Florine's work is so poetic. It's not really difficult. I think what was challenging with this book is really to come up with that structure of comparison and
mhm,
create a character that is an independent character from Florine, because
mhm,
it is ultimately about a child, and also a child who says goodbye to her imaginary friend, because at the end of the book, in order for the girl to enjoy her own life, she needs to stop pretending living that imaginary life with her
mhm,
imagined artist. So I think finding that was not an easy thing, but making it sound pretty is a
mhm.
little easier.
Oh, okay. Well, that kind of brings me to this question. What do you do with, like, how do you make those ideas work of creating the books and the characters in them, whether they're based on real people or they're fiction?
I don't know if I make them work. I hope I make them work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to make them
Mhm,
work. I try to use what I know or how I feel, but whether they work or not, that's really not up to me. That's really up to the readers, whether they're children or adults.
oh, okay. That's a good way of looking at it. Um, so this brings me to this lovely image. You've worked in theater, stage design, poster design as an illustrator, award-winning painter, and in 2023, you created this illustration for the MTA that went on the subway cars in 2024. Um, of all the things that you do, what's the most fun? What are you most proud of? What comes the easiest?
Well, nothing's easy, and
No.
everything's easy because it really depends on a project.
Mhm.
I love all of these things. I think they just different accents of the same language. The big difference is time, maybe, because when you work in theater, you really need to time things correctly because a play runs a certain number of hours or minutes, and you really need to make those minutes work with the changes and what's happening conceptually with your scenography. And the same thing happens with books in a way, because you turn pages and you can slow down or speed up the narrative of a
Mhm.
story with how you compose it and how you draw it. With a single still image like this, it has to be immediate. The attention is really short. You have to look at it and get what's happening right away. So it's just a different angle of looking at things. With this one, it is actually moving. It's really fun to see the train, not the train that you're on with it, but actually a different train that has this poster going by, because then you can see the
Mhm.
superhero actually fly. So that's kind of like a little nice trick that you can make work for yourself.
Nice, nice. Well, going back to the book, this is another illustration from the book. Um, what you are writing for the child that you are or you were, what do you hope or what would you like other readers, adult or children, to take from this book in particular with the art and the words and the story?
Good question. I think it's going to be different for everyone. For myself, I just want to be, happy with what's around me. And I think this is kind of a repeated theme in my books, because
Mhm.
my character is usually this sullen, sad, lonely character. I don't know if I'm sullen or lonely, but somehow I just like seeing that transformation that happens to a character. If the character is sad or lost or standoffish, whatever the character is, I'd like to see at the end of the book that this character has changed in a certain way. So
Mhm.
I think all these books are about a change. So
Mhm.
if this particular character, this child, was a sullen child, at the end of the book, it's a happy child who discovers something new and learned to see the world differently. And I think that's kind of the takeaway. Just liking the life as is, whether it's raining, whether the squirrels are dragging bagels,
Mhm.
in Central Park. It's just really, really embracing your life as is.
Yeah, that's really lovely. Um, oh goodness. I had a question for you at the top of my head. Oh, that's it. Of all of the books that you have illustrated and authored, do you have a favorite? Is there one that was a lot harder to do than the others? Is there one that just came naturally?
Huh. Well, I'm not gonna name favorites because they're all here in the room, so I don't want them to over here. But there were books where I wanted to have a really complicated challenge,
Mhm,
and I achieved that. I made my work very difficult, and a book like this was Mona Lisa in New York, because I've always loved the Renaissance art, and I've always loved graffiti and
mhm,
street art in general. And I thought for the longest time about combining these two, finding a way to combine those visually and also in the story. And once I wrote this book about Mona Lisa coming to New York and falling in love with the graffiti man, I
mm,
had to illustrate it. And that was really tricky and interesting, because the Renaissance art comes together with street art, and they have to somehow fuse and still
mhm,
work symbiotically. And it happened, but it was quite a challenge for a visual artist, for sure. So that was the
mhm.
difficult one. And the easiest one was the book that's coming out called Another Tongue, which I just came up in the shower, so under 3 minutes probably. And yeah, I've
Mhm.
lucked out with that one. It was just really, really easy and natural and really fun to do.
Oh, nice. Have you done books in other languages?
No, I haven't. And they have not been translated yet. Some of the books that I've illustrated were translated, but
Oh, okay,
not not my own yet. Hopefully soon.
okay. Now, you said your mother was an illustrator. Um, did she have a fine arts background, or did she encourage you to have a fine arts background? And how did you come up with how'd your style evolve of
Hmm.
illustration?
Well, she is an illustrator and she does have a fine arts background. We actually went to the same high school,
Oh, wow.
and I was even named after her favorite teacher. So yeah, but
Oh,
there is that. And of course, as a little child, it's your mom, and you want to be like your mother in so many ways, and in everything really when you're little. And then of course you want to work like her,
mhm.
but I'm a grown woman and a mother myself at this point. So yes, of course
Oh,
my life has changed and my style has changed since I was young, and it has to change, and I hope it changes, because
mhm.
I would hate to just be the same person as I was 30 or 20 years ago. So yeah, it's still changing, and I hope not for the worst, but it's
No,
hard to tell. You just hope to get better, not worse.
yeah. Well, is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about before we open it up to questions from our attendees?
Oh, I don't know. I think you've asked me a lot of questions, and yeah, I hope you got your answers.
Oh, I'm gonna stop sharing now real quick so we can see. Let's see. If any of you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Carly says, I read your book, A Visit to Moscow, where you illustrated text written by a different author. Do you find that your process is significantly different when you are illustrating someone else's work? If so, how does it differ?
It's completely different.
Oh.
Yeah, it's different. Um, because when I write, I have much more control over what is happening in the book, and I can control everything.
Mhm,
And the story, when you write the story, you can write it. I think about everything at the same time. It's kind of like a stereo situation, because I'm envisioning things as I write, and I also change my words as I draw. So everything is happening at the same time. And of course, I'm very flexible when I'm working with myself as an author, because I can really convince myself that this is the
Mhm.
right way to do it. And when you work with a separate author, it's more complicated, and a lot of it is serving what the author wants to do. So yeah, quite different.
Oh, wow. So did you say with the Party for Florine, you you did kind of the writing and the drawing, not necessarily one after another, but you had to come up with the writing first, right?
It's true, yeah, but you can do things at the same time. It's sort of it's hard to track really. I write it quickly and then I do some sketches and
Mhm,
then I go back to writing. I like to have a story structure first. I feel like it's a good idea for me because then I know how it's going to flow. And but as I'm writing, I imagine my pages right away. It sort of happens at the same time. And also because I don't want to repeat myself. I don't like when art and words are redundant. I try to make things happen in such a way that illustration is this extra layer
mhm.
on top of words, or if there are not enough words, everything is said through art. So when I'm both an author and illustrator, I can do those things simultaneously.
Nice, nice. So Matthew asks, when creating your storyboards, do you colorize them, and how do you establish your palettes?
Huh. I usually don't colorize them. Sometimes I would have like a little section with color. Usually, for some reason, I just see the color so clearly in my mind. I just know what is going to happen. I actually was only once maybe asked for color storyboard, and I got kind of annoyed because I already knew what I needed to do, and it was sort of strange to be asked to really think about it cerebrally. I usually have a really clear idea about my color, but I'm lucky this way. Color is really easy for me. I also know how manipulative color is,
Mhm.
how easy it is to influence the scene or to set the mood with color. I actually find grayscale work much more challenging and elegant on many levels. So color is easy.
Nice. Simona says, thank you for your beautiful work and the color. And then Abigail asks, what is your inspiration? That's a big
One
question.
of those questions. Usually I say that the subway is my inspiration because this is something new that I see every day. Every day something insane happens. And it's really exciting. It's very interesting. But I don't need to go to the beach to get inspired. I don't need to go to the park to get inspired. And like I said before, actually I read someone said it, inspiration is for amateurs. So I kind of agree
Mm.
with that. I can make myself work, and I can find something interesting within pretty much any time of the day.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, do you find now that you said yourself are a mother, do you find inspiration in having a child, the child within you, but then also having a child? I mean, do you ever think about the story and how the story will be impactful to your little one?
Well, my little ones are already, big shaving men.
Oh my gosh.
But yes, they
Sorry.
they do read my books, and
Uh-huh.
always one of my first readers. And if they laugh, it makes me very happy. And they did inspire my some lines in my books. One of my sons came up with a title for one of my books, which was really wonderful. And
Mhm.
also, my upcoming book, Another Tongue, was largely inspired by my children because my children grew up only speaking Russian at home until they were about 6 years old.
Mhm.
And then I watched them learn English, and they made the funniest mistakes, and they interpreted things very interestingly. And I
Mhm.
wrote those things down many years ago when they were little, and I was finally able to use some of those. So yeah, in this way, they directly influenced my work, not just inspired. It's indirectly.
Okay, great. That's so great. Tabitha asks, you talk about changing as an artist. What do you see most different in your work now than your work from 20 years back?
Oh, that's really simple. I think my work is much more edgy right now because I went through a very rigorous academic schooling when
Mm,
I was growing up. And in a way, it's really good because it gives you freedom to experiment, and you know your anatomy and you understand perspective. All of that is great, but a part of it makes it could make it very stiff and sort of difficult to break those rules because you know those rules so well and you grew up with them. And it took me years to unlearn that academic style. And I know I can whip out a very nice, realistic drawing, but I don't want to. I really want to do something strange. I like stylizing things and breaking arms and legs when I draw. So, and I want to do more of it. I really want my work to look effortless and not necessarily realistically correct.
nice. Matthew says, thank you for sharing your magic with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Nan Cow says, love your work. Curious when you write stories in your second language, what's the challenging part? And are there any tips you've learned through the process to help the writing flow better?
Everything is challenging when you write in a foreign language. Of course, there is this fear that you're just going to mess it up really badly, or you wouldn't understand the context.
Mm,
I leave out my articles all the time because my language is my native language, doesn't have articles. So yeah, some of these things are probably will stay with me forever. Um, Really, if you have foreign language, if you're writing in a foreign language, I think the best advice I could give is to think in the language that you're writing in, because translating doesn't really work well as you write, just because languages are so different. So if I had to translate, let's say, one of my books into my native language, Russian, at this point, it would have to be a new book. I don't think I would be able to translate it exactly.
yeah.
So as far as flow, um, you just do your best. I just try to have a good sense of a language. I don't think having a sense of language is something that you get. It's not something that you get in a new language. I think you probably just have it naturally, and if it works in your native language, it will probably work in a foreign language. So I love languages in general. I'm always curious about the little differences and little stylistic strangeness of
Mhm.
any language, and I try to convey that as much as possible in both languages. And what I really like is precision. So I always try to find that precise word or the precise sentence to express myself, and that works in all languages for me.
Nice. Let's see. Carly says, I know you have illustrated books for many age groups, including children, middle grade readers, and YA readers. Do you have a favorite age group to illustrate for?
Yes, adults. Because I think they're a picture book for adults. I like illustrating, and I know there is a convention that an adult book doesn't have illustrations, but it doesn't have to be this. I feel like a picture book could be written, or should be rather written, in such a way that it's interesting for children, but also interesting for adults. Because guess what? Who is going to buy this book, and who's going to read it over and over and over again to their children? It's going to be the parents, and they need to find something interesting. It's done a lot in animation. I'm sure you all seen those
Mhm.
animated films where everybody laughs, everybody
Mm.
cries, and I think it should apply to children's books just as well.
So Abigail asks, what is your dream project?
Oh God, I don't know.
That's another big one.
All my projects are my dream projects right now. The project that I'm working on right now, my graphic novel, is pretty much a dream project for me because there is so much writing. I finally feel that I have my own voice as an author, not just an illustrator. And I've just been really lucky with my editor, who lets me do whatever I want and understands me, and listens to me and makes my book so much better with her advice. So having that collaboration is really a dream. So I'm actually I'm actually kind of living my dream now in terms of my creative work. So yeah, everything I do right now is, yeah, I'm really lucky.
That's so awesome. I know, hearts. Let's see. Matthew asks, how often do you explore drawing with your opposite hand?
Oh, well, I'm left-handed, but
Mhm,
um, kind of ambidextrous. So sometimes I don't even notice when I switch. When I paint, it doesn't really matter to me. I paint equally with both hands.
mhm.
Um, I don't really need to explore it because I've been doing it for a while. I I think just out of curiosity, just to see if my style's slightly different. That's the only thing that I notice. It's much more difficult for me to write actually with my wrong hand because I started as a lefty, but I was converted because I'm 100 years old. I was
Yeah.
converted in school, in elementary school, and I was made to write with my right hand, but I just couldn't draw with my right hand. So my left hand is my drawing hand, but my right hand is my writing hand. So right now, actually, I'm struggling quite a lot because I need to handwrite. You'll see it sort of in the mirror image, but I need to handwrite the title of my book. And
Oh,
it is so difficult for me to do because I write with my right, but I'm not happy with the way it looks. So I need to switch to my left, but my left doesn't write as well. But I can write as a mirror image from right to left with my left hand, and then I can flip it in Photoshop. So it's a lot for my brain. So exploring drawing for me with my opposite hand is nothing. Writing is really a big deal.
wow. He says, fantastic answer. That is incredible. Let's see. Stephanie Pierce, I think she just popped out, but she said, hello from Fine Arts. I love seeing your work and hearing about your process. Thank you for sharing. Hope to meet you sometime at FIT.
Thank you.
And then Tabitha, I love picture books. Yeah, they're really great. They're great. Um, well, we have a few more minutes if anybody has any other questions or if there was anything else you wanted to discuss about your upcoming work, or let's see, hold on. Daniel from Hoff, love your work. I'm curious, do you have any tips for getting started and landing more book projects? Also, any advice on working with publishers and managing revisions?
Well, if you are an illustrator, I think you're a graphic designer, Daniel. But I think if you're an illustrator, usually the publishers match you with authors. But if you're an author and illustrator, you really need to start submitting your work to either publishers or agents who would share your work with. Yeah, I see your answer. Who would share your work with publishers? With revisions, it's tricky. It's really depends on your relationship with your art director, your editor, and hopefully, if you're allies, you're going to work great. But it doesn't always happen, and sometimes it's tricky. I usually try to, use my influence and explain why I want things a certain way. In terms of design, actually, it's one of the important things for me, and I always tell my book illustration students that you have to be a designer, even if you just an illustrator. You have to think in design terms. You have to plan how you're going to organize your text on the page because you need to have that vision and you need to have that control. If you don't do it, someone else would do it for you, and it's not going to be exactly what you want or not necessarily what you like. So it's always good to have that in your portfolio or in your mental bank as well, knowing how to design.
That's a great answer. That's really great. So you're working on a graphic novel and two more picture books. He says amazing, super helpful. Is there any other, and you've done posters and this, that, and the other. What are books your favorite projects to work on? Would you say
If the books are my favorite,
projects to work on?
I don't No, not necessarily. I like switching things up a lot. For example, when I work on a book takes a long time. A book
Mhm.
can take a few months, maybe a year for some, and it can get a little repetitive. Like once you finished with your initial writing and with your sketches, a lot of work is very technical, and those are the moments when I really crave editorial work. I love doing work for magazines and newspapers, and for many reasons. I love that it's conceptual, that it's so intellectual. You have to really come up with a smart idea to illustrate a specific story. I love that it's so quick. Sometimes, you get a 24-hour turnaround, especially for larger publications. They can easily give you, a couple days or,
Mhm.
one day to do it, and you need to think really fast on your feet. And I love that. And I also love that I can switch my style around because I can experiment. And what I really love in my life is experimenting. So if I can, I would experiment really quickly. I would try a slightly new style. I would try different materials, and all of those things only possible when you work on quick projects like editorial projects. So I love them all. I wouldn't want to be stuck with just doing one thing. Even if I love that thing, I really like to, change things up.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. One last question Matthew has. What is the largest format you have illustrated? Have you created murals for public artworks?
Well, not exactly murals, but when I worked in theater, sometimes I would paint some of the scenery myself. I don't do sort of traditional scenery in a way, that like big trees that fly in and out of the space. But
Mhm.
I've done some rather complicated imitation of graffiti work for one of my shows for Romeo and Juliet several years ago. And so those were pretty large. I'm a painter, so some of my paintings are quite large, maybe not as large as huge street art, but large enough for paintings. The biggest illustration I did was actually last year, also for the MTA for Long Island Railroad. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that. It's too many R's. And those are really big posters, and I had to work at actual size. So yeah, that was like
Wow.
for an illustration. It was really a big, physically big piece.
Well, that's great. That's so great. Um, if there are no further questions, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Yevgenia, for joining us tonight. Um, yeah, everybody, it's been an inspiring talk, and we appreciate having you illuminate our programming at the FIT Library. And for more information on FIT authors or how to submit to be featured, go to the website at authors.fitnyc.edu. You'll also see more about Yevgenia's profile and her book. And you can also follow us on Instagram for upcoming FIT authors talks at FIT NYC Library. So thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you, Jen, and thanks everyone for coming.
Okay, good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.